Remember to pause the video, to write the questions down, and to find answers for these questions. Zoot and Snoot will help me to help you. You still remember the function machine? Now in our function machine today, we're going to have to multiply the input numbers by -2 and then add a -1 or just subtract 1. So if one variable is influenced by another, we say that there's a relationship between the two variables. And this shows the relationship. And this is our algebraic expression. So y is -2x minus 1. The relationship, the algebraic expression. So an algebraic expression describes what calculations must be done to find the output number that corresponds to the given input number. So just let's play a little bit and put an input number there. That was 1 times -2 is -2 and -3 is -3. So we know our machine is working, and we'll put a few other input numbers to get corresponding output numbers. So the first type of representation is an algebraic expression. And we always have to simplify it. Ours is simplified. The second representation is our table, which can be vertically like this, or it can be a horizontal table. Your input numbers are going to be represented by X and your output values as Y. And then the third type of representation is a graph. So this pattern is then represented by a graph, and it forms a straight line. So we will discuss these 3 types of representations in our lesson today. What is a flow diagram and how is it used to represent a pattern? If you use the rule 5x plus 20, it means you'll have to times an input number by 5 and then add 20. So we've got a couple of input numbers, and we'll have to use substitution to get the output numbers. A relationship between variables in which there is only one output number for each input number is called a function. So this is a function. So we'll substitute -1 for x, and then 5 times -1 is -5 plus 20 is 50. We'll do the same for -2, -3, -4, and -5. This is our flow diagram. So a flow diagram consists of input numbers, which are represented by x, and x is called the independent variable. Output numbers, which are also called function values, which are represented by y, and y is the dependent variable, as well as a rule or a formula. And this rule or formula shows the relationship between the input numbers and the output numbers. What is a formula and how is it used to represent a pattern? So let's use the rule 5x plus 20 is y. That is basically a formula. So a formula is the rule. A formula shows the relationship between x and y. X is the independent variable, and it represents all the input values. We then use substitution to find the dependent variable or the output numbers. The dependent variable is then y. So 5x plus 20, if x is -1, we substitute -1 for x, and then it equals 15. We do the same with all the other input numbers, and we can find the output number, which in this case is y. So the formula of 5x plus 20 is y is another way to represent a pattern. What is a table and how is it used to represent a pattern? So we use the same rule 5x plus 20. A table is different to a formula in a flow diagram. It shows the input values and the output values in table form. So you've got your input numbers in the top row and your output numbers in the bottom row. The input numbers are represented by x, which is the independent variable, and the output numbers will be represented by y, which is the dependent variable. And again, we'll use substitution to find our output numbers. What is a graph, and how can we use it to represent a pattern? We draw a graph by plotting the pairs of values that we can see in the table. A graph has 2 axes, the horizontal axis, namely the x-axis, and the vertical axis, namely the y-axis. Note that these lines can continue infinitely, that's why they've got arrows. The input values are plotted against the horizontal axis and the output values against the vertical axis. The point where the lines meet, that's our point. Let's look at our first point. We've got x is -5 and y is -5. So on our x-axis, we go to -5. On our y-axis to -5. And then if we use our rulers, that's where the two lines meet. That is our point. There we go. So our point is then indicated by a -5, which we call the x-coordinate. Remember, that's the input value, and a -5, the output value, which is called the y-coordinate. We always use a semicolon to separate the two coordinates. And then our next point will be in -4, 0. So on our x-axis, -4, y-axis, we are on 0. Note that if a point intersects the x-axis, then the y-coordinate is 0. Our next point would be -3, 5. Let's see. So on our x-axis, -3, on our y-axis, 5. And where the two meet, that's our point. Then the next one, -2, 10. Let's see. -2 on the x-axis, and then we go 10 up along the y-axis, and that's our point. And the last one, -1 on our x-axis, go along the y-axis, 10, and that's our point. And with a couple of points, we connect the points, and we've got a line with 2 arrows, because this pattern can continue infinitely, and that's why there are arrows. Now we just have to practice. So we must be able to show a pattern using a formula, using a table, using a flow diagram, using a table, and using a graph. Happy learning!